Long before James Cameron sunk his caffeinated fangs into the true story of the Titanic, Roy Ward Baker's film A Night to Remember was the most notable recreation of the event. Now sure, it wasn't the first film to depict the 1912 sinking of the Titanic. As a matter of fact, there was a film made that very year that the ship sunk. But prior to A Night to Remember, there was the 1953 film Titanic. It featured a star-studded cast of Clifton Webb, Barbara Stanwyck, and Robert Wagner. The film has problems. Specifically, it's more of a melodrama about marriage than it is a film that focuses on the disaster itself. I mean, in the film's defense, it seemed like it'd have to be if you hired Webb and Stanwyck for the leads. But this is specifically why I like A Night to Remember as a far better Titanic film. There are no huge stars, and it's more of an ensemble survival picture than anything else. The special effects are astounding, and there's rarely a moment where you don't feel the tension mounting. The overall message and historical context also feels very appropriate, rarely trying to force the tone with music. The narrative, formed from Walter Lord's 1955 book of the same name, centers around a handful of passengers aboard the towering ship. Some of them are selfish and push their way to the few lifeboats. Others find themselves committed to helping women and children off the ship. Others simply don't believe that something so horrible could happen to such a vessel. And others find themselves just giving up, recognizing the hopelessness of the situation. It's a picture that doesn't so much follow one or two characters as it does covering about, a half a dozen mini arcs or so. But if there's one character who gets the most attention and the best lines, it would have to be Second Officer Charles Lightoller, played by Kenneth More. Charles was the naval officer on board who escaped and remarked how unbelievable the event seemed. He says he may never be sure of anything else in his life as he watches the unsinkable ship descend into the ocean. The portrayals felt natural, and this is mostly thanks to the consultation of Titanic survivors. There were still a few liberties taken here and there, as with the fact that there were more British passengers focused on than Americans. And I mean, this isn't too surprising considering it was a British film made for British audiences. Also worth noting is that this is one of the most expensive British movies that was ever made at the time. It gives a lot of cred to the tagline of the movie's poster, which declares that the film is the greatest sea drama in living memory. Given that this is a disaster movie, the special effects are incredibly impressive for the era. Now, I watched this film on a projector, and the miniature shots certainly do show their age, but the many practical shots of the ship were quite astounding. For shooting these many scenes, the filmmakers wanted to use the former flagship Dominion Monarch. However, the company of Shaw, Seville, and Albion Line, who owned that very ship, declined the offer as they did not want one of their ships to be associated with the sinking of the Titanic. The filmmakers would ultimately reach a deal with the company Shipbreaking Industries to use the 1920s ocean liner, the RMS Asturias, for their film. That ship was decommissioned and was due for scrapping anyway, so it was the perfect opportunity to use a decaying relic for staging the disaster. The filmmakers would have to work quickly, however, as one side of the ship was already being scrapped, so the side that wasn't demolished was built up to look more like the Titanic with a fresh coat of paint. They also used some mirror trick photography to stage other parts of the ship. What's even more fascinating about this depiction of the Titanic is that it actually lifts some footage from another Titanic movie. A dramatization of the sinking was filmed in Germany in 1943, and scenes of the boats and the flooding engine room were used in A Night to Remember. Now, when I say that the film was lifting footage, that may seem lazy, until you realize that it was taken from 1943's Titanic, and that film was actually Nazi propaganda. No, seriously, it was commissioned with the explicit intent to show off the Germans were brave, and that the Americans and British were doomed to fail. The film's original director was arrested and died in prison for not being Nazi enough, and the film itself wasn't even shown in Germany because it was feared that it wouldn't raise morale among the nation. And it's just kind of wild to realize that some of the thrilling shots from A Night to Remember were directly lifted from a Nazi propaganda movie that was itself banned for not being propagandist enough. There's a lot of inspiration that A Night to Remember gave to James Cameron's Titanic. If you look around on YouTube, you're bound to find some comparison shots and dialogue between the two pictures. If you're watching A Night to Remember for the first time and have already seen James Cameron's Titanic, the inspirations should be very obvious. The guilty coward looking back at the boat, and the ship's designers of Thomas Andrews not making a try for it, the band who plays their last song, the captain who goes down with the ship, and the scene where our two lovers draw each other naked. Oh wait, sorry, that actually didn't happen in A Night to Remember, sorry. Even with so many familiar elements and dated effects, A Night to Remember still holds up. It's still a good-looking picture and genuinely thrilling with tension coursing throughout. The commentary on the division of economy amid a sinking behemoth makes for a great allegory of class struggle. The performances are pretty top-notch even for such a crowded ensemble. There's even a hopeful message at the end to stress how mistakes were learned from this event. It's just such a damn good disaster movie. And unlike most movies of this genre, it isn't totally mindless with its carnage. The drama of feuding characters is just as compelling as watching the ship go down for the count. And sure, James Cameron's film will probably be the more recalled movie about the Titanic, but really there's just something so strong about A Night to Remember that makes me love it a bit more than its bigger blockbuster counterpart.